Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So as normal, we'll continue a reading from the biography of Srila Prabhupada. Okay. And when Atreya Rishi visited Srila Prabhupada and asked that he visit Tehran, Prabhupada said that he was ready to go, but now you have to take a bundle of bones. Just for some context, I think Prabhupada has already left his body by this time. They're sort of reflecting, Prabhupada was reflecting his body was basically just a bunch of bones. But Prabhupada is so firm in his conviction that he's not this body. So now, he's probably saying, now you have to take a bundle of bones. They were, of course, the same themes that Prabhupada had always taught, the same themes that were in his books, but the lessons were more poignant and striking when Prabhupada applied them to his own situation. More than one devotee compared Prabhupada to Bhishma Dev, who gave important instructions in his last days. As Bhishma felt no pain and delivered learned and loving discourses, even from his bed of arrows, and as Bhishma determined by his own free will the time of his departure from the world, so Srila Prabhupada spent his last days oblivious to his physical condition, defying death and instructing his spiritually innocent sons. But Prabhupada's sons could no longer stand by and simply hear the philosophical lessons. Prabhupada had accepted their affection when they had cried for him to stay with them, and now they wanted to express that affection in the only world they understood, our world with Srila Prabhupada living and talking with them, laughing or reprimanding them as he liked. They wanted him to eat and drink and become physically strong again. But again, Srila Prabhupada seemed to change, and he began refusing food and drink. He had postponed his passing away to exchange lovingly with his disciples, and yet at the same time, by refusing to eat or drink, he was showing his preference for passing away. He admitted when pressed that it was an impossible course of action to live without food or drink, nor did he expect or want miracles. If he was to get better, it would be by taking nourishment, but for reasons of his own, he would not eat, and he said recovery was material and he didn't want it. He kept closely in tune with the will of Krishna, allowing the holy name to sustain him. The doctors who came were often puzzled, but those who were Vaishnavas understood and respected his prerogative. Prabhupada's servants made anxiety-filled attempts to induce Prabhupada to take regular treatment, but Prabhupada preferred to take only Kirtan and Bhagavatam, while at the same time sustaining a willingness to live. He empathized with his disciples' anxiety and patiently explained the puzzling situation they were in. He wanted their care, and he allowed them to try to treat him, knowing that it was bringing them more and more into a surrender of love. But gradually it became more clear that Krishna's will was indicating Prabhupada's departure. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continue reading from Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Canto 7, Chapter 2, entitled Hiranyakashipu, the King of the Demons, and text 28 onwards. So I'll read the first myself. Ushinaresha budraja suyagya iti vishuta sapatnya nihato yude yatayastam upasata. Just for some context here. Hiranyakashipu, his relatives are very distraught because recently Hiranyakashipu's brother Hiranyaksha, who was also a great demon, has been killed by Lord Vishnu. So the relatives are very distraught and he's trying to pacify them. Previously, he gave them philosophy, but we understand that philosophy isn't always so. When people are upset, they don't really want philosophy. So he's starting to tell them a story. In the previous verse, the story was introduced. It's Itihasam Puratan, meaning an old history between Yamaraj and the friends of a dead person. So this is the story just beginning to start right here. So in the state known as Ushinara, there was a celebrated king named Suyagya. When the king was killed in battle by his enemies, his kinsmen sat down around the dead body and began to lament the death of their friend. So there's a purport here, but there's 3 verses, so maybe we'll chant the 3rd verse together. Is that okay? Otherwise, it's a lot of Sanskrit and we end up getting tongue-tied. So I'll chant the first 2 myself. Vishyana Ratna Kavacham Vibrashta Bharanashajam Sharanir Hitayam Shayanam Ashrigavilam Prakirna Kesham Dvashtaksham Rabashadashtacha Dachadam Rajakunta Mukambojam Chinayuda Bujamride. Then together. Usi Naredam Vidinatatakritam Usi Naredam Vididaktatakritam Patim Mahisha Parasamiksha Tukita Patim Mahisha Prasamiksha Dukita Atasmanateti Karer Urubrisham Atasmanateti Karer Urubrisham Nantyo Muhustat Parayor Upapatam Nancho Muhustat Parayor Upapatam Usinarendram Vidinata Takritam Patim Mahisha Prasamiksha Dukita Atasmanateti Karir Urubrisham Gnantyo Muhustat Parayor Upapatam Usinarendram Vidinata Takritam Patim Mahisha Pramiksha Dukita Atasmanateti Karir Urubrisham Gnanjo Muhustat Parayor Upapatan. Mataji's. Usinara Indram. Usinara Indram, the master of the state of Ushinara. Vidina, by providence. Tata, thus. Kritam, forced into this position. Patim, the husband. Mahisha, the queens. Prashamiksha, seeing. Dukitaha, very much aggrieved. Hata, killed. Sma, certainly. Nata, O husband. Iti, thus. Karai, with the hands. Ura, the breasts. Brisham, constantly. Nantya, pounding. Muhu, again and again. Tat padayoho, at the feet of the king. Upapatam, fell down. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. His golden bejeweled armor smashed, his ornaments and garlands fallen from their places, his hair scattered and his eyes lusterless. The slain king lay on the battlefield, his entire body smeared with blood, his heart pierced with the arrows of the enemy. When he died, he had wanted to show his prowess, and thus he had bitten his lip, and his teeth remained in that position. His beautiful lotus-like face was now black and covered with dust from the battlefield. His arms with the sword and other weapons were cut and broken. When the queens of the king of Ushinara saw their husband lying in that position, they began crying, "O Lord, now that you have been killed, we also have been killed." Repeating these words again and again, they fell down, pounding their breasts at the feet of the dead king. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. As stated here, Rabasa Dashta Dachadam, the dead king, while fighting in anger, bit his lip to show his prowess. But nonetheless, he was killed by providence, Vidina. This proves that we are controlled by higher authorities. Our personal power or endeavor is not always supreme. We must therefore accept the position offered to us by the order of the Supreme. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Dena Bhutare Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadanti Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamaram Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Yuta Parakaram Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bando Jigatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Anchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Pinevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, dear devotees. As always, I'm humbly seeking your blessings that together we may delve deeper into the nectar of Srimad Bhagavatam, and I may say some words which are chaste towards Srila Prabhupada. So here we Hiranyakashipu, although he's a great demon, as we've already discussed, he's very intelligent. So he knows how to teach. Just yesterday we were doing one Gita class and reflecting that Krishna is such a great teacher. Many ways, but for instance, at the start of the Bhagavad Gita, he gives a summary of what he's going to say, then he says it, and he gives a conclusion. And this is a very nice way if you're ever been told how to do a presentation. They say, you should do this. So even material people, they're trying to do some TED talk, they still follow the example of Krishna. So similarly, Hiranyakashipu he's a great teacher. He knows that people are not so ready for philosophy when they're upset, but stories are very, very powerful because stories transcend the false ego. If someone says, you should not be so foolish and lament for your dead relative, then they can see that personally it can not sink in so well because they're feeling very emotional. They think, how can you just say that to me? You're no compassion, etc. But if you say, let me tell you a story. Okay, there was this person who's not you, and they were very foolish because they were lamenting over their dead relative without understanding who they truly were. And then you can that story will sink in because it like circumvents the false ego. The pride doesn't get in there because the pride is what is prohibiting us from learning. So in that sense, but it's interesting because Srimad Bhagavatam is stories within stories within stories. So here we have, of course, there's sages of Naimisharanya and Sutta Goswami. This is the overall story. And then inside that we have Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadev Goswami. And then inside that, I think is Narada Muni and Yudhishthira. And then inside that we have Hiranyakashipu and his relatives. And inside that we have Yamaraj. Later it'll come up. Yamaraj. This is Yamaraj speaking to some other people. And I think a couple of verses later, it gets one step deeper, where Yamaraj begins to tell a story about a pigeon. So I think it's 7 layers of stories. It's a little bit confusing to get your mind around sometimes. But, you just accept it as it is. So here we have, perhaps we could say, the epitome or the personification of trying to of being fully in the illusion that this material life is all in all, and that somehow that this situation could be perfect. So you have here a king, and a king is naturally, the word for king is Raj, very much in the mode of passion. To be a king, to be a great king, you have to be very much engaged in the material world. You have to have lots of wealth, and people have to respect you in this sense. But it's therefore a very difficult job. So the Bhagavatam details the prerequisite of many people to become Raja Rishis, saintly kings, and renounce all this. But here we just have one king who's very much in the mode of passion. And basically, he's been slain on the battlefield, and everything that he stood for has now been cast aside. So previously, he described how very celebrated king. He had lots of prestige, very beautiful, many wives. You can imagine nice hair, nice armor, everything, etc. But now his entire body is smeared with blood. He's lying on a battlefield. His heart has been pierced by the arrow of the enemy. His beautiful lotus-like face was now black and covered with dust. And his arms, which had been strong and holding these swords, were now broken. And so everything that he sort of thought that he was has now been taken away. But then you see here, this is the illusion of material life, is that he's thinking, well, this is going to happen to me. So I don't fully understand this, but describing he bit his lip to show his prowess. He wanted to see, when people will see me on this, lying on this battlefield, at least, I'll look powerful. Maybe anyone could explain what it means with biting the lip. How could that show prowess? I don't have any. Yeah, and then his wife's. So he's sort of somewhat an illusion. He's very proud of his material circumstance and wants to demonstrate his prowess even at the time of death. And then his wife's, they're also an illusion, because it's interesting. The word faith in Sanskrit, shraddha, means to put your heart into something. And really, one of the meanings is your faith is determined by what you think you can find pleasure in. So people say, oh, I'm not a man of faith. Everyone's a man of faith or a lady of faith, because they put their heart into something, whether it's they're putting their heart into, some people put their heart into economic development, into investments, etc. You think that's where they're going to find their pleasure. Some people put their heart into, some career, put their heart into, art or culture, etc., because they have some connotation, some idea that they're going to get some pleasure from engaging in this activity. So similarly, the queens have put their heart into the king. And so now that they see him lying dead, they begin crying, "Oh Lord, now that you have been killed, we have also been killed." Basically, you put your heart into something, and when that thing gets killed, then it feels like your own heart has been killed. And this is demonstrating here that, the living entity, everyone fundamentally knows deep down that the living entity, we are eternal. And therefore, we're eternal, and we eternally have loving relationships. We have a loving relationship with Krishna, and of course, Krishna's devotees. Prabhupada says it's a sign of impersonalism to want to see Krishna on his own. Krishna is actually more beautiful when surrounded by his devotees, just as a diamond is more beautiful when set in a gold ring. So similarly, we have eternal loving relationships with Krishna and Krishna's devotees. And we fundamentally know that deep down, but we forget. We're covered by illusion, and therefore we get into material circumstance, and we have a loving relationship with people, and that relationship can be genuine. It's not that many relationships are based upon lust and exploitation, but there is relationships of love, but fundamentally they get torn apart, and this heartbreak is such an unnatural thing. Even particularly like the whole Vedic system of marriage, etc., avoids people having undue heartbreak, whereas in the West people often go through maybe for 10, 20 years is regularly giving their heart, putting their heart into someone, this intimate exchange, and then it gets torn apart, and over time that really just very much destroys you, and it actually impedes on your ability to form loving relationships if you're so used to anyone you come close to just getting torn apart from. People say, well, if you're with, maybe a man and woman get together, and I say the Buddha in the West as well, you either get married or you break up. People say have a fear of actually getting too close to anybody because it's been torn apart so many times. It's very tender, and therefore we have a fear of getting close to Krishna. So that's why it's interesting when you read about the spiritual master. Prabhupada is sort of he's demonstrating what it means to be a spiritual master, is that primarily, especially in the early days, he's just forming loving relationships with people. He's so caring, so compassionate, and he basically wins people's hearts. And therefore, they're willing to put their heart into that relationship. And Prabhupada, in that relationship, the spiritual master, he's a representative of Krishna, and he's demonstrating how it is that we should act and relate to Krishna. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado, yasya prasada nagati kutopi. That only by pleasing the spiritual master can we please Krishna. We can't even please Krishna directly. And therefore, the spiritual master, he comes very mercifully and he conquers your heart. And when he's conquered your heart, then you'll see that the devotees, like disciples of Prabhupada, would come, he conquered the heart, and they would do anything for him. And this is how loving relationships work. It's not a matter of give and take, a matter of exchange, etc. It's a matter of someone conquers your heart, and then you'll give anything for them. And so similarly, spiritual life, to conquer someone's heart, it cannot be a mundane thing of just one time off. I do something for you, I conquer. No, it's a repeated every day. It said, Ado Guru Parasraya. First take shelter of the spiritual master, of the Guru. But also it means, Ado means first and at first. So it means constantly, with every endeavor, everything you're doing, first take shelter of the spiritual master. When you wake up, first take shelter of the spiritual master. When you do any service, take shelter of the spiritual master. Constantly like this, because it's a constant process of conquering the spirit, of dedicating yourself to the spiritual master. And we see that as well. Spiritual life is a development of love. This is the goal, to develop pure love for Krishna. And love is never boring. It's many things, but it's never boring. And it cannot be mechanical. Always you have to go an extra endeavor. You have to conquer. Yes, previously, maybe a time when we can chant, we begin the process of devotional service, and maybe we start chanting, and we feel so much reciprocation. Because you see, Krishna is very pleased. We come from absolute zero to now doing some devotional service. He's very pleased by that. Then he wants more, and we have to give more, constantly give more. Because Krishna is greedy. He wants more from us, and we should be greedy for him. Krishna bhakti rasa bhavitamati kriyatam api kutopya labite tatra lolyam api mulyam ekalam janma koti sukriter nalabite. That the most valuable thing is Krishna bhakti rasa, this being able to relish pure devotional service. And if one has any intelligence whatsoever, then they should purchase this right away. But let me ask, what is the price? If this is the most valuable thing, then what is the price? This is Rupa Goswami writing. He says, Tatra lolyam. Lolyam is greed. Intent is greed to obtain it. This is the price. Janmakoti na sukrite na labite. That many, many millions of births of pious activities don't obtain this opportunity to relish devotional service, but intense greed to obtain it. And so we have intense greed to associate with the sadhus, intense greed to absorb ourselves in Shastra, intense greed to hear the holy name. This is the quality. and gives the eggs back. And this is what it's like. We have no qualification, but just by sincere endeavor, then we obtain the mercy. Similarly, there's one other story. There's two frogs, and they somehow or other they end up being caught in a large jug of milk overnight. I can't remember the name of it. You have a big jug of milk sometimes in India, and so these frogs they're caught in here and they can't escape. And no one's going to come for the whole night until maybe the morning, and so they're swimming along trying to stay afloat. One of the frogs is thinking, well, what's the point? We're not going to be able to swim all night. We're just going to tire, so I might as well give up now. And the other was thinking, well, okay, you're right. I'm not going to be able to swim all night. I'm going to get tired. But nonetheless, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to hope against hope. So one frog, he sinks back down and he drowns in the milk. But the other frog, he's saying, well, I'm just going to keep going. And because he's paddling his legs, it churns the milk and it makes a lump of butter. And the butter floats up and he sits on the butter and then he's okay and then he jumps out. And this is what it's like, that the material laws of cause and effect, when it comes to devotional service, they're not so apparent. Because what Krishna wants to see is our sincere endeavor, our sincere desperation. And therefore another prayer Rupa Goswami says, he says, Na prema shravanadi bhaktiya, that I do not have prem, I do not have love at all for Krishna, nor do I have any love or attraction to the processes which awaken love, such as hearing and chanting. I don't like this. Na prema shravanadi bhaktir apiva yogotava vaishnavo. I'm not a Vaishnava. I don't have any of the mystic powers that many great devotees have. They have all these mystic yogic opulences, etc. I have none of this. But not only that, he says, Jnanam va shupakarma va kyadaho. Alas, I don't have any knowledge, and nor have I done any pious activities. I have no qualification whatsoever. Sajjati rapyastyavad. I do not even have. I've not been born in a good family. I've been born in a very low family. So he lists all his disqualifications. I have no love. I have no liking to the process which awakens love. Not only that, I've got no other qualities of a Vaishnava. I have no knowledge. I have no pious activity. And I was not born in a nice family. But nonetheless, Hina dikara sadike tvaitata pyachuda mula sati. That mula means root. So this deeply rooted, this hope which is deeply rooted in my heart is there. Because I know that Krishna, you're Hina dikara sadike, that you're the savior of the most fallen. You're the savior of the most fallen, and therefore this hope is here. So he says, He gopi janavalabha tvayatata, He gopi janavalabha vyatayate, ha ha marasaiva mam. So this hope is deeply situated in my heart. He's saying, He gopi janavalabha, Krishna, who's the maintainer of the gopis, this hope is causing me great pain. The hope is there. He cannot get rid of it because he knows that Krishna is the savior of the most fallen. Hinadikara sadike. And therefore that is our qualification. Our qualification is the mercy of Krishna and hope against hope. And this overcomes all the material impediments. This is Rupa Goswami saying that he has no knowledge. Rupa Goswami is he's celebrated throughout India as the most learned scholar. His poetry is unfathomable. There's some verses he's written. I need to learn the verse, but referring to rasa, and there's only 2 syllables in the word rasa, and he only uses 2 syllables, and he creates a whole shloka and beautiful poetry describing rasa. He's beyond comprehension how incredible his mind is. He's saying he's got no knowledge. He's saying I'm not born in a pious family, but he's born from a very elevated Brahmin family. But then because he worked for the Muslim government, he's thinking that not. He's saying I have no attraction to the processes that awaken bhakti. But you look at his bhajan, he clearly has some attraction, but yet he thinks like this. But he's demonstrating to us, okay, if he thinks he's unqualified, then how should I feel? Because compared to him, I really have nothing. Okay, fair enough. He had to do some work in a Muslim government, therefore he might have lost his supposed good material birth. But like, myself, born in a much lower family than that, in the West, etc. So we have no qualification whatsoever. But Krishna is very, very merciful. And then we have even more qualification, is that we have the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all the disciplic succession, ultimately culminating in the spiritual master. The spiritual master is known as the Kripa Murti. He's the personification of the mercy of Krishna. And therefore we just need to hope against hope. And in this way we can become like the frog who thinks, well, everything's hopeless, but nonetheless I'm going to keep trying. And he turns the butter, he turns the milk, and the butter comes up. So Lord Chaitanya's mercy is inundating the entire world. And mercy is like a great river. The river is coming, it's flooding everything. And the river, it naturally flows downstream. So similarly, if we're actually able to realize that we're helpless, that we have no qualification, then we will awaken ourselves to realize, okay, we're downstream, and that's where the river comes. But if we're puffed up thinking that I do have some qualification, yesterday we're discussing, sometimes we often say, he is full of it, he's full of it. And it's a phrase we have. What does it mean to be full of it? It means there's no room for anything else. So you're full of it, you're puffed up with your own conception, you think you're much greater, then there's no room for the mercy of Krishna. So this is why we say every morning, Trinadapi Sunichinam Tarodi Vashishtana Amanida Maradena Kirtanya Siddhahari. The perfection of chanting is to be chanting constantly. And one can only chant constantly when they realize that they're lower than a blade of grass. They're more tolerant than a tree. And how to do this? How to realize it? Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he cries out, Gurudev Kripa Bindodiye Kuroe Dashe Trinapeka Atihinat. Gurudev, please bestow upon me one drop of your mercy. One drop of your mercy, and I can realize that you'll make me more humble than the straw in the street, free from all false prestige, and in that state of mind, then I can properly cry out to Krishna, who is Hinadikara Sadhake, the savior of the most fallen. We can say, He Gopi Janavarabha Shetayate Ahamarai Sevamam. This hope is causing me great pain, but nonetheless I can't give it up. So perhaps we'll humbly stop here and ask us any comments or questions. When we associate with the verses they contain some of that mood. It's not a matter of just learning what it sounds like, etc. But we're associating with the devotee themselves. When we learn verses from Bhagavatam, we're associating with Krishna. And it's not a matter of just intellectually learning things. It's like, you put a normal piece of metal beside a magnet, they rub together, then this piece of metal also becomes magnetic. So learning the verses is one thing. We can't artificially, feel that humility, to feel that we're nothing. But the more that we develop this process of devotional service is that famous thing that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj says, that we're not trying to just have low self-esteem. Low self-esteem means to think less of yourself, but we want spiritual humility, which means to think of yourself less. So initially we should just change the attention away from ourselves and put it to Krishna. And always the meditation should be on the mercy of Krishna. Focus upon the mercy of Krishna. And in that way, we will draw closer to Krishna. And as you draw closer to Krishna, then naturally you realize how unqualified you are to get there. Or if you reflect in your own life, maybe I know myself. Okay, you meet some devotees, you read the books, you get involved in devotional service, and initially you're very humble. You think, well, these people are amazing, they know so much, and then after a while you think, well, I know quite a lot as well. Then you start thinking, well, they're quite lucky to get me. They're lucky to get me. Krishna's pretty lucky to get me. You have this sort of conception that I'm just speaking about myself here. That, I'm something special. And over time, you spend time with devotees, your false ego comes into gets hit a little bit, and you realize, actually, hang on a sec. Maybe I'm the one who's very fortunate. These people are not fortunate to get me. I'm the one who's fortunate to be in their association. And so slowly over time, you can see there's some change. But still, the false ego is there, the pride is there, and it comes up, it resurfaces. But if you reflect over your time in devotional service, you can see there's a change. And so similarly, this change will keep continuing if we properly are engaged, if we're fully immersed in the fire of Krishna consciousness. The fire of Sankirtan is this process of chanting the holy names, being desperate to chant the holy names, and engaging other people in the chanting of the holy names. If we're not in the fire, then we can just become. You can never stay still in Krishna consciousness. You're either moving towards Krishna, or slowly we're placing more things, building up that wall between us and him, building up the wall of the false ego. You simply take the society of devotees as something material, and this is a very offensive mentality that seeks into myself a lot, that you can come to devotional service with many ulterior motives. You can be distressed. You can be wanting, freedom from this anxiety. You can be wanting some respect. You can be wanting to be part of some community of people. You can have all these ulterior motives. But if you remain on this platform of having ulterior motives, it prohibits you from actually achieving the goal. And if you never achieve the goal, you'll simply retreat, because over time, it's difficult to be around devotees unless you're anxious to hear about Krishna. It says, I always find it very striking, the purport in the 10th chapter of the Gita. It says, discourses amongst devotees can only take place amongst those who are anxious to be in the society of devotees, anxious to know Krishna. You have to have this anxiety, and this anxiety is what keeps you in the fire. And being in the fire, that's what protects you from the false ego slowly building up again. Maybe if you have anything you'd like to share. Okay, any other comments or questions? And then what can happen? You can become proud of your humility. It's a cycle, and then Krishna again comes and breaks you down. And okay, we'll stop here. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Ananta Koti Vaishnavanti ki jai.